Congress and people in the White House, and they're not hearing what people who work in schools are saying. They're not hearing what parents are saying. They're not hearing from teachers. And so they think they're doing just great. They think that No Child Left Behind has worked. They think that it should be the foundation for the future of reauthorization of the SEA. And when I met with folks at the White House, not the president, but with very high-level people, they said, we don't want to hear your criticisms, we only want to hear your proactive ideas. Well, they didn't want to hear my criticism, so I gave them a few ideas. They weren't interested in those either. And I realized that they have cotton in their ears, they have a program. It's merit pay, it's incentives, it's charter schools, it's race to the top, and they are not interested in knowing that there's evidence against these things. Well, it's particularly valuable to me to be here in getting a Horace Mann Award, because I've read, I think, almost everything that Horace Mann has written. And before I left for the airport the other day, I sat down to read his reports. Didn't read all of them, but certainly reread his famous 12th annual report very carefully, which is one of the great justifications for providing a common school education. And I think it's particularly relevant right now to talk about Horace Mann, because he understood that as a society, we have to educate all the children. He understood, before anyone else did, that there's a communal public responsibility, and that it's in the interest of society to pay for the children. It's in the interest of society to invest in the education of all young children. It's in the interest of people who don't have children in the schools to pay for the children who are in the schools. And he tried very hard to explain why it was in the economic and social interest of people who were not directly affected to provide for the future. And why this is particularly relevant right now is that reading the newspapers, watching the news, seeing these emails that I get every day, it seems as though the lights are going out. We've elected governors who say they want to improve education and cut the budget. I don't know how that's possible. We see state after state where they're attacking teachers, eliminating seniority, eliminating tenure, eliminating job rights, attacking teachers' right to collectively bargain. And I know you may have your disagreements with the union, but contracts have to be signed by two parties. And if you give away too much, shame on you. I think that people have the right to have a voice. And Horace Mann understood about collective responsibility. We seem today to be moving in the direction of restoring the state of society pre-Horace Mann, where everyone was on their own, where parents had a choice between academies, private schools of high tuition, where they could pay or go to a free school. The free schools were usually pauper schools. And I think that we're moving in the direction that I think is very frightening, where the children who can get into the charter schools will be selected, and the rejects and refuse and unwanted low-scoring kids will be in the remnants of the public school system. That's a nightmare scenario, but in some places we're moving closer towards that view. So I want to use my unscripted moment to ask all of you to engage in this, what I think is an epic battle for the future of public education. I do believe that there is no successful society in the world that has not bolstered a strong public education system. Certainly when we look at the two top winners of the PISA competition, Shanghai is not privatizing its schools. It has a strong public system. It uses its strong schools to support its weak schools and make them better. Finland actually abolished some of its private schools and turned them into public schools. And there are very few independent private schools in Finland now as a result. But we seem to be wanting to move back to the early 19th century, both in terms of the charter movement and also in terms of allowing poverty to fester without being directly acknowledged and confronted. So I think this is a time where I hope you will become engaged, firstly because I need you to be engaged. I am being invited everywhere in America and I can't do it. There's nobody else out there. I mean, I would like to say that it's flattering to be wanted, and I don't want to be wanted anymore. much. I used to say when I first started speaking a year ago, don't post my speech online because no one will invite me. Now I say, please put it online as fast as you can. Everybody can have it. Don't invite me. It's too much. I need everybody here to speak up and to be involved and to, if you could each get 10 people that you know, to get 10 people, write to your congressman. You represent the United States. They don't hear you. They don't hear what No Child Left Behind has done. I can't tell you how many people in Washington think that it's a success and the people in schools know it's not. They don't know. The congressmen don't know. They're not even thinking about education. They're leaving it to their 24-year-old staff member to write the education legislation. And they're listening to the DC think tanks, almost all of which are now funded by the Gates Foundation. I think Bill Gates is a very wonderful, honorable man. At least I'd like to believe so. But I don't think he should own American education. I think we have to maintain our democracy, and where you have to get elected to have that kind of power. So I think what we have to do is to get the news to Washington. We must stop the federal government from running everything. Over the last 10 years, with the beginning of No Child Left Behind until today, the federal government has assumed a degree of power that our founding fathers absolutely never intended. And when I worked in the U.S. Department of Education 20 years ago, we were very, very careful not to step on the prerogatives of states and local districts, and that's gone. The federal government now thinks it's fully capable of sending out mandates that tell you what to do. And this is wrong because I can tell you, it's a fact, there is no one in the Congress who knows how to reform a school. Collectively, there is less educational wisdom in the entire Congress and the U.S. Department of Education put together than in any school in this country, including the so-called failing schools. At least in the schools that are designated as failing schools, there are educators who've been working with kids every day for years and years. They know more about these children and their needs than the collective wisdom in the U.S. Department. And I say that not to insult the department. I work there. I know the people who work there. They're virtually all the same people who were there 20 years ago. They're people who do contracts. They do grants and contracts. They're civil servants. They're very nice people. None of them know how to reform a school, including the highest levels. So with that, I would like to invite your questions. Thank you.
Now this is kind of interesting because you kind of answered part of these, so I'll do one of these quickly. Your speech was wonderful this morning. Where can we get a copy of your speech to show it at home?
Well, the first thing you can do is that Dan Ravitch promised me that the videotape would go online almost as soon as possible. My written speech I have to work on because there are parts of it that are written out just as I gave it, and then there were things that I just made up as I was going along. And several people said to me that the line they liked best was the one that wasn't written, which is when I said, I admitted my mistake, why can't they? Or I admitted I was wrong, why can't they? I threw that in. So I have to find out where I threw it in so that I can write it in. But the other thing is that in the written speech, I frequently will have a word, and that word allows me to say a paragraph. So I have to write that out too. I can say Milwaukee and tell you that Milwaukee proves that vouchers don't work, and I can tell you why. So I can't just give you a speech that says Milwaukee. So I have a little bit of editing to do to make that ready.
Thank you. But actually sharing the tape is very, very helpful. And if we have permission to share that tape other places,
Give it to the world.
give it to the, okay, you heard it.
No.
Give it to the world.
Show it to anybody you want to show it to, because I think what has not gotten out is the fact that all of these things that are being pushed into the public schools have no evidence behind them. And I can tell you, and I'm not saying this out of personal pique, that whereas I've been beating my brains out for the last year trying to get this message across, and there's been growing evidence, research evidence, that none of this works, I've not been able to get on national television. So, there you go.
Well, now lots of people said, will you come to talk to my board? Will you come and talk to our legislature? And on behalf of the state of Wisconsin and the 20,000 people that are standing up for teachers today at our state capitol, would you come and talk to the Wisconsin College?
Well, I would certainly talk to anybody who would listen if I don't already have a commitment, and I am pretty heavily committed. But certainly if there's the opportunity to talk to, I have to say, one of the things I've been trying to do the last year is to find a leader. And I have gone from place to place. I feel like Diogenes with a lamp in search of an honest man. But I have not yet found that leader, although I have two possibilities. One is Jerry Brown in California, because I was very happy to see that when he came into office, the first thing he did was to remove 5 corporate reformers from the State Board of Education, and my God, he replaced them with 5 educators. I mean, how astonishing is that? And then I am going to be meeting in early May with the governor of Rhode Island. I have an appointment on May 5th, and I'll be meeting with the State Board of, I guess it's elementary, secondary, and higher education. So that's a beginning. And he's also said publicly that he's not going to move forward with charters until he talks to me. So that's a start. Little estate, big estate, some hope.
Well, if we could move away from the big picture of reform for a second, because I have a whole stack of questions asking you about next steps, but we also have some specific questions. And we have a couple specific questions on the issue of testing, particularly PISA testing and NAEP testing. But I'll read to you the PISA question, and that's, how can we overcome inaccurate comparisons of schools in America to other countries?
Well, you know, I'm not quite sure how you do this because the scores come out and they are what they are. And this is sort of a puzzle that the U.S. has, as I said in my talk earlier, typically done far worse than we do today. And it's nothing to boast about to go around and saying we're in the middle of the pack. We used to say that we're comparing apples and oranges. The apples and oranges now are that, particularly when we look at European countries, we're looking at countries that have a very strong social safety net that we don't have. And I know that the NASSP printed a study in which they showed that when you looked at low poverty schools, the low poverty schools ended up doing as well as the highest performing nations in the world, which also had low poverty. So I think that it's a sophisticated argument, but we have to make it, which is that our schools are not failing. Our schools have incredible challenge to deal with. And if you don't believe it, come and spend 3 days in any of our schools and see the kinds of problems that the kids bring to school, that the families are struggling with, and that the teachers have to deal with. But having said that, I also believe that this country needs to do some deep, serious thought about the reconstruction or structuring of the education profession. What I have wished would happen would be that instead of pumping $150 million into Teach for America, that our federal government would have a big commission to say, what can we do to encourage people to enter teaching and make it a lifelong career and to stay in teaching? And so one of the things I believe might be productive would be a loan forgiveness program in which we say, if you apply to college and you're accepted in such and such a college and you pursue a course to become a teacher and to commit to being a teacher, every year you teach, your college debt will be forgiven by a certain percentage so that after X number of years as a teacher, you're debt-free. College today is so expensive that that would create an enormous pool of very capable people wanting to enter teaching, and teaching could then become far more selective about who enters it. And then once you have a really terrific crop of people saying, I want to be a teacher, I want to make this my life's work, give them the support to succeed, give them the mentoring that they need to succeed. And then instead of having 50% of our teachers dropping out within the first 5 years, we might then aim to have a 0 attrition rate. That would be a worthy goal. But we don't have that kind of thinking right now. Instead, we're dealing with these, like charters is a very small bore approach. 3.5% of the kids are in charters. If we pump billions into this sector, we might get it up to 7%, all the while undermining our public education system. TFA is a small bore approach. We need large thinking. We don't have any large thinking right now. So there's a big agenda for change, and nobody's tackling that. It's not about we need to protect the status quo. We need to improve the status quo, but all that's popular now is simply diverting our attention from the big changes that we need to make to improve our schools.